Hello and welcome back to another KCC video. I'm Rob, and today we'll be jumping into some Tales from Tech Support. Our first story today comes to us from Internal Car 8922. Why are you using a candle? Let's jump right in. This story is from years ago when I provided tech support for a company of cheap PC clones that are no longer available in the United States, but which are still sold in other parts of the world. Now, to say that many of the purchasers of these computers were first-time users is a vast understatement of the case. Many of my best stories from this time come from the nexus between bad hardware design, cheap customer service solutions, and insanely novice users. So sit right back and I'll tell you the tale of the mythical creature known as the user and his capricious and unpredictable ways. Today's call you will never forget. On this call, the caller complains that his computer no longer boots up. In checking his specs, I note that it is one of the notorious riser board units. These are designed to use a smaller motherboard than most computers of the day, and this is done by having one expansion slot on the motherboard and then inserting into this slot a riser board with 5 or 6 expansion slots on it. This basically moves most of the expansion slot portion of the motherboard onto a daughter board and changes the space requirements to make the computer smaller. But in order to make the expansion slots on the daughter board compatible with all the cards out there, there are massive data and power connections between these two boards, resulting in an unstable situation where if the daughter board shifts even a very small amount in its slot, it will ground out the entire computer and leave it unable to boot. The solution? The correct solution would be to send a technician on site and have them remove and reinstall the daughter board and thus get the computer running again. The cheap customer service solution we are given instead is to walk the user through the process of opening the ridiculously complicated case, identifying the riser board, use a screwdriver to remove it and then reinsert it, put everything back together, and hope it now works. Often it was a rinse-repeat sort of thing, where the second or third time is the charm. These calls take a ridiculous amount of time and tend to make users uncomfortable as they're being called on to basically perform heart surgery on their computer. Never wanting to assume the hardest solution first, I start with basic things like checking if the computer is plugged into the wall and having the user unplug the power cord from the back of the computer and from the wall and reconnect it to make sure it isn't loose anywhere. We also check the power and connection to the monitor to make sure nothing is hinky there. And so we step through all the basic troubleshooting, and it is now time to tackle the dreaded riser board issue. With more than the normal level of difficulty, we get the case open. I am now describing the internals of the computer to him to help identify the motherboard and riser board, and the user says, "Hang on, I don't want to drip wax into the computer." "I'm sorry, did you say wax?" "Yeah, I'm using a candle to light the inside of the case." "Why are you using a candle?" "Because the power is out." "Did it not occur to you that you would need power to use the computer?" "Sure, but it has a battery in it." "It indeed does. A watch battery. A battery just strong enough to help the computer not forget the date and time when turned off and unplugged. And even so, these normally needed to be replaced about once a year or the computer forgets what day it is." I explained this to the user, but he doesn't want any part of it. He wants the computer to work during a power outage off a small watch battery. I apologize that I can't help him with that, and then help him put the case back together again, after which he asked to talk to my supervisor. This was easy to accomplish. My supervisor and about 3 other people had been listening in on the call after it started to go long and well before we determined the source of his trouble is a power outage. They're still listening and generally having a good laugh at the befuddled user's expense. The supervisor comes and listens to the user's complaint, which isn't about me, he likes me, but all about the computer not working when the power is out. It was voted Call of the Week. There's not too much to say after this one. You have to be a special kind of stupid to think that little battery's gonna run a whole computer. How was the monitor supposed to work as well? Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from Norgeek. Computer says no signal. Let's jump right in. Back in the mid-2000s, I was technically an intern building PCs at a small computer shop, but in reality, I did everything from picking up parts from our supplier to shipping and dealing with customers and troubleshooting, and even did the weekly garbage run. It was around the time when many businesses here in Norway started to move their stuff from physical locations to online services. Everything from banks to government functions, and lots of people were starting to pick up their first PC out of necessity rather than interest. I get to work and find that I have a build order for one of our basic PCs. I build it, test it, pack it up, and call the customers as they wanted to pick it up at the store. I happened to be at the front desk when they came to pick it up, and it turned out to be an elderly couple, so I offered to put everything in their car for them. Those cheap steel boxes were heavy back then. Apparently, they would get help to set it up at home. Just as I'm about to leave work for the day, I get called to the office and I'm told there's a problem with the computer I built earlier that day. The elderly couple is on the phone and I take the call. "Hi, I heard you were having a problem with your new computer." "Yes, you forgot to include the antenna." I'm pretty sure there wasn't supposed to be an antenna. It didn't have Wi-Fi. "There has to be. The computer says it isn't getting a signal." "Did you connect everything? Are all the lights on? Did you figure out all the cables?" "Yes, everything is connected. It's just not getting the signal." I'm not a phone support guy, and this elderly couple does not appear to be sufficiently comfortable with this new contraption to go through troubleshooting by phone anyway. I also know it'll be a hassle for them to pack everything back up and return to the store, normal store procedure. I ask them where they live, and it's not a terrible detour from my drive home, so I offer to drop by and take a look. When I get there, everything looks fine at first glance until I realize that the tower isn't anywhere to be found. Huh? The monitor is saying no signal because there's nothing other than the mouse and keyboard plugged into the integrated USB hub connected to it. "Hey, where's the PC?" Blank stare. "The big black box." "Oh, so there is something missing." I then remember that I carried everything to their car, put the monitor and accessories in the back seat, and put the PC itself in the trunk. I go out to their car, find the PC where I left it, and bring it inside. A couple of minutes later it's running, and I get it connected to their internet service. I realize that they'll need a bit of a crash course to get started, and I offer to show them how the basics work. They gladly accept, but insist on serving me dinner first. I got home pretty late that day, but I never charged them anything for it. The food was good, they were nice, and for years afterwards, they'd send their friends and family to our shop to buy computers. There's a quote by Charles Kuralt that I think sums up this situation completely. It says, "There are a lot of people who are doing wonderful things quietly, with no motive of greed or hostility towards other people, or delusions of superiority." OP, thank you for helping out these people, and you've also secured yourself a bunch of business in the future, so it works out best for everybody. Our next story today comes to us from Tater Biscuit. Exec getting angry because she has been receiving calls from our critical situation alerting system over the past week, but she's not on any crit-sit or on-call teams. Let's jump right in. This is one of the most absurdly hilarious things I've seen at my current job. A high-level marketing exec, very high in the company but not at the VP level or we wouldn't be dealing with her directly, is understandably very angry because she's getting calls at all hours on her mobile from our crit-sit system that alerts on-call engineers of failures and emergencies in the hardware-software infrastructure. There are a couple of hundred teams involved and probably 1,000 or 2 engineers in the on-call system. I'm in there, but in 5 years have only been called twice, and once was an area of business that I'm not part of. Though I did respond and collected some sweet overtime. She is not one of the people who is on call, hence angry and very much WTF-y. She has received a bunch of text-to-speech voicemails, all sounding very urgent, but they triggered her well-developed, "this is not legit, I should notify security" detectors. The company from time to time and without announcement sends phishing emails to different groups to find out who might fall for one. Awareness of the issue is above average here, I would say. We went round and round over this. It looks an awful lot like a phishing attack. The grammar and spelling are characteristics of a well-known region in the world, not Nigeria, where a lot of suspect emails come from. It says it's reporting a problem with a particularly popular X500 database, also a product of the company, but the team it references doesn't exist. X500 prod, where X500 is the name of the popular database system, and production is a common name for an instance of said database product. We just don't have an instance named that. It would be some kind of sophisticated attack that knows what crit-sit alerting system we use and thinks it knows which database system we use internally. but gets the instance name wrong and targets someone whose technical knowledge would probably fit on a single glossy brochure for whichever product she works with in marketing. It took us days to find out who was responsible for the alerting system. It took a further 2 days to convince them to help us to find the target's name somewhere in the on-call list in the system. They kept insisting that it was some kind of phishing or social engineering attack and not coming from our system. Anyway, they relented and searched for her name and/or phone number. Nope, her name and her phone number are not anywhere in the system. The "this is an attack" faction is gaining support. We can see that these calls originated from outside our telephone network, but that doesn't help. The exit point for the alerting system is external for obvious reasons. You can't report a problem with the phone system if you have to use the phone system to report it. Then I see an email. Why does team name have phone number as their on-call number? I look at phone number and see that it is our company's front door main corporate phone number. Team name is the name of the team that manages the CritSit alerting system. Epiphanies and revelations abound. It turns out that someone set the on-call number for a test environment of the alerting system to our corporate main line, for testing. Someone is from part of the world where the characteristic grammatical mistakes often found in phishes and spams are common. They reproduce the text of the alerts from memory. There's no shame or shade intended here. English is a very difficult language, and this part of the world has had English as part of its elementary school curriculum for centuries, long enough to have developed a peculiar and characteristic set of grammatical inconsistencies. In many parts of this region, different dialects of the local language are difficult for people of other dialects to understand, so English is the lingua franca for many of these fine folk. Yes, I did that on purpose because it's fun to tease the French. Phone number is answered by a sophisticated phone menu system that accepts voice as well as dial pad entry. Apparently, it was interpreting the recorded message from our alerting system as, somehow, please direct this call to person. The now substantially less angry marketing exec. Wait, isn't stuff that annoys the marketing people more of a feature than a bug? As mentioned in the comments though, it is pretty impressive that a senior executive had the sense to think that it's a problem and didn't just block the number. Our last story today comes to us from the same OP as the first story, Internal Car 8922. Guy who builds computers for a living destroys his cheap name brand computer. Let's jump right in. I get a call from a young man who introduces himself by declaring that he builds computers for a living. I ask myself, why, if you have the ability to build a computer, would you ever buy one of these cheapo systems? After purchase, he wants to boost the video and bought an add-in VGA card. Installing such a card is easy, but sometimes you have to change a jumper or a dip switch on the computer's motherboard to get the computer to recognize and use the new hardware. For those who don't remember such things, dip switches are like little tiny light switches that can be turned on and off with the tip of a pin. Pin jumpers are little pieces of plastic that can be placed over two pins to create a closed circuit or removed to break the circuit. Pin jumpers are cheaper, so that's what we use. Some of our computers at this time have literally 50 or more jumpers, and if you open or close the wrong circuit, it will render the computer unusable without a technician to put things back the way they should be. We had one case of an OCD ADD teenager who had been swapped out twice on his computer after pulling every single jumper off the motherboard, and when he did it for the third time, they bought his computer back from him and banned him from ever buying another one in his life. But that's a different story. So it is not unusual on our computers of the day to need to change a jumper pin configuration for the computer to recognize and use an add-in video card. And knowing this, the young man checks the schematic for the motherboard and the motherboard itself, but cannot identify which jumper does that. But he does see a chip labeled VGA, and so he extracts this chip, but now his computer no longer boots at all. This is a real forehead smack moment for me. First, his model is designed to auto-detect an add-in video card and turn off the onboard video as soon as you boot it up with an add-in card installed. He did not need to change anything for his new graphics card to work. Second, the only chip on his motherboard that had VGA written on it is his CMOS BIOS chip. For those of you who don't actually build computers for a living, this is the only part of the computer that has programming when you first turn a computer on. Its job is to make sure everything needed is there for the computer to work, and then looks for and loads the more extensive programming normally stored on the hard drive that gets you doing all the other fun things a computer can do. By removing this chip, he had essentially rendered his computer brain dead. And because it is a flashable CMOS of the EEPROM type, this chip itself was destroyed by the process of removal. Any programming it had contained had been erased by the process. It could not be reinstalled and then made to work. The only viable solution for this issue is a full motherboard replacement. And since what he has done also completely voids his warranty, he has to pay for the parts and labor himself. Needless to say, he is none too happy with this result. He escalates it up to my supervisor and then my manager, but I leave extensive notes and it remains a non-warranted repair. A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So I know just enough about computers to get myself into trouble, and I was wondering why the BIOS chip would be stamped with VGA, but he actually answered this in an edit. It says, why was the BIOS stamped VGA? Because VGA was still new, and this company offered computers that had VGA, and cheaper ones that did not. So they stamped all of the VGA compatible BIOS chips with VGA to aid in manufacturing. I guess that makes a little bit more sense. Check out all 4 OPs at the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.